Hey folks, I'm Pastor Joseph from Culpeper Presbyterian Church. Welcome to our Lenten devotion series on wisdom. When I was searching for this congregation, my faith statement began with, I believe God would rather we have a good question than the right answer. Good questions deepen our relationship with God. Answers let us trust in ourselves. And so this series is not intended to provide definitive answers. It's intended to be a guide for your own discipleship. If you have any questions along the way, feel encouraged to share them, both with your small group and with me. You can also leave a comment in our YouTube channel if you're not currently attached to a Bible study group. Our passage today is Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, and then continuing with verses 20 through 33. I invite you to pause the video to read it together with your group. And although I recommend the Common English Bible, the New Revised Standard Version, or the Tanakh translations for this project, you are welcome to use any translation you like. Comparing different translations is a great way to gain insight into Scripture. And once you've read that passage together, take some time while the music plays to meditate on it and to doodle or make notes as you respond to the questions in your devotional booklet. want to go ahead and define some terms. First of all, the Bible is a library of different books, and like any library, contains a variety of genres. Wisdom literature is one of those genres. It shows up pretty late in the formation of the Old Testament, and although it likely has much older origins. And there's some debate among scholars as to what counts as wisdom literature. But generally, folks agree that it encompasses Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. We'll be studying a couple of other books as well over the course of this study, but that's just a bonus. Wisdom literature comes from a bunch of different authors and a number of varied perspectives, but it does share an underlying worldview. The first is the assumption of an orderly creation. Wisdom literature assumes that God creates, orders, and sustains creation, and that by reflecting on creation, we can learn something about the Creator. Thus, natural theology as revelation does indeed mediate the Lord, who is seen to be the generous, demanding guarantor of a viable life order that can be trusted and counted on, but which cannot be lightly violated. The attentiveness to creation in wisdom literature also extends to human experience and human relationships. We are, after all, created beings, and moreover, we're created in the image of God. Wisdom literature, therefore, focuses more on human experience than on divine intervention. God is assumed to be intervening constantly in creation, keeping everything going in mostly predictable ways. And so then we just study the ways that we experience that in order to gain insight into what God is constantly sustaining. Wisdom literature also has the refrain of the fear of the Lord as its beginning. Fear for Christians living in the 21st century America is tied up in connotations of abusive fathers and judgmental pastors, and perhaps a better contemporary translation would be that wisdom begins with living in awe of the Lord. Wisdom literature lives in awe of God and averts its eyes from the dangerous and grand holiness of the Creator, choosing instead to meditate on creation. The fear of the Lord manifests itself not in a cowering subordination to divine authority that shuts down inquiry, but in an invincible curiosity that believes there is more to know and understand about the meaning of life than what the eyes can see. And with that background, let's turn our attention back to Proverbs chapter 1. It begins with what's called a superscription, basically giving credit for the book to King Solomon. Now, Proverbs was probably not actually the work of King Solomon, but this superscription does capture the importance of King Solomon in the imagination of the covenant people, especially after their return from exile in Babylon. And although the memory of King David is connected with the Messiah, King Solomon presided over Israel at its greatest with regards to political and economic influence in the region. Wisdom's experiential, rational mode of understanding was needed for administering and governing the empire, for developing a scientific understanding and implementation of the rules of agriculture, economics, warfare, and architecture, for establishing royal policies governing every aspect of life, from law to religion to economics to education to the military, and for planning future directions for the kingdom. This section also provides a framework for the book of Proverbs and for wisdom literature in general. They are not about providing answers or even really insight. Wisdom is an endless pursuit. The wise can hear a proverb, even a familiar one, and grow in wisdom. The second section of the reading introduces the character of woman wisdom. She's a fascinating character in Proverbs. She's the personification of wisdom, not just as common sense or even as an intellectual undertaking, but wisdom as a divine gift. She shows up a number of times throughout Proverbs, and we'll talk a little bit more about her next week. I think it's an excellent literary device to not only having us pursue wisdom as a spiritual discipline, but also have wisdom call out to all of us. Wisdom is not locked up in the temple or in academic institutions, but is out on the streets and in the public squares. Wisdom requires engagement with the world to be truly pursued. Everyone has access to wisdom, even though most folks ignore it. And of course, ignoring wisdom has consequences, but it's important to note that wisdom does not punish. Actions have consequences, and ignoring wisdom means that she is of no help when disaster comes. Attentiveness to wisdom, however, brings a measure of security. Now, we're just getting started in all of this, so I'm primarily trying to create a baseline understanding. And I'm also seeking a baseline understanding, as most of my training has been in the prophetic tradition as opposed to the wisdom tradition. So lots of this is new to me too. Purposeful discipleship is one of our goals as a congregation. And my own personal discipleship means exploring a genre of Scripture with which I am unfamiliar. We're also being intentional about our relationships, so we get to undertake this discipleship together. Now, I'm going to turn things back over to your small group leader so that y'all can have a conversation about this presentation and, more importantly, about how you can pursue wisdom in your own discipleship.